The sound came first. A gunshot, sharp and final, cutting through the elegant music of a ballroom. Then screaming. Footsteps scrambling across marble floors. Crystal glasses shattering. And through it all, a whisper. A man's voice, fading like smoke. "You're safe now," a child sobbing. Then another voice, younger, more desperate, tearing through the chaos like a blade. "Daddy, Daddy, no!" Two children crying, one gunshot, one hero falling. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's go back. 12 hours, to a small apartment in Brooklyn where the morning light was just beginning to creep through worn curtains and where a different kind of battle was being fought. Garrett Thornton woke the way he always did, gasping, reaching for something that wasn't there anymore. In his dreams, it was always the same. Not the battlefield. Not the blood and sand of Afghanistan. Those nightmares had faded years ago, replaced by something worse. A hospital room, white walls, the steady beep of machines, and Rachel, his wife, her hand growing cold in his as she whispered her last words. "Take care of our Haley, Garrett. Promise me." He sat up in the darkness, 38 years old, his heart pounding like he'd just run a marathon. His hand found the dog tag hanging against his chest. Cold metal, familiar weight, duty and honor. The words engraved there had meant everything once. They defined him through 12 years of Special Forces operations, through missions that would never appear in any official record, through the blood and sacrifice that earned him a call sign whispered with reverence in military circles. Ghost Wolf. But that man was dead now, had been for 6 years, buried alongside Rachel in a cemetery in Queens. The bedroom door burst open. "Daddy, you promised pancakes!" And just like that, the darkness lifted. Haley Thornton, 9 years old, stood in the doorway, with her hair sticking up in 17 different directions and her favorite unicorn pajamas twisted sideways. She was missing a sock. She was always missing a sock. She was also the only reason Garrett got out of bed every morning. "Did I promise pancakes?" He pretended to think about it. "I don't remember promising pancakes." "Daddy," she put her hands on her hips, a perfect miniature of her mother. "You promised yesterday when I finished my homework." Garrett laughed, the sound surprising him the way it always did. 6 years and his daughter could still make him laugh. Could still make him feel like maybe, just maybe, the world wasn't entirely broken. All right, pancake party it is." In the kitchen, while Garrett mixed batter, Haley spread her homework across the tiny table. The apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that barely fit both of them at the same time. Nothing like the house they'd had before, when Rachel was alive. Now there was just this, but this was enough. "Daddy?" Haley looked up from her worksheet. "What does courage mean?" Garrett paused, spatula in hand. "How do you explain courage to a 9-year-old? How do you tell her about the things you've seen, the moments when courage meant running toward gunfire instead of away from it?" You don't. You give her something simpler, something truer. Courage means doing what's right, sweetheart, even when you're scared, even when it costs you something. Like a superhero? Like anyone who chooses to protect someone else. Haley grinned, that gap-toothed smile that made his chest ache with love. "You're my superhero, Daddy." Garrett slid a pancake onto her plate. "And you're my everything, sweetheart." Across the river, in a penthouse that occupied the entire top floor of a Manhattan high-rise, Adrienne Calloway was already on her 3rd conference call of the morning. "The projections look solid, but I want to see the quarterly breakdown before—" She paused, catching movement in her peripheral vision. "Hold on." Rosie stood in the doorway of the home office. 8 years old, already dressed in her school uniform, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail that was clearly self-attempted. "Mommy, can you braid my hair today?" Adrienne glanced at her watch. 6:47 a.m. The gala was tonight. The investor meeting was in 2 hours. Sweetie, Mommy has a very important meeting. Ask Maria. But Maria always does it too tight. It gives me a headache. Rosie, please, not today. Something flickered across her daughter's face. Not surprise, more like confirmation. Like Rosie had expected that answer before she even asked. Okay, Mommy. She disappeared down the hallway, footsteps quiet on the marble floors. Adrian watched her go, feeling that familiar twinge of guilt she'd become so skilled at pushing aside. Later. She'd make it up to Rosie later. At 32, Adrian Calloway was the youngest CEO in the history of Calloway Industries. She'd taken over after her father's stroke 3 years ago, fighting through board members who thought she was too young, investors who thought she was too inexperienced. She'd proven them all wrong, doubled the company's stock price, made the Fortune 500 list 2 years running. She'd also lost her husband in a car accident 6 months after taking the CEO position, had watched Rosie retreat into herself, growing quieter each year, had built walls so high that sometimes she forgot there was anything on the other side. But the company was thriving. That had to count for something. Garrett took the subway to Manhattan, standing in the crowded car with his maintenance uniform pressed against strangers in business suits. Nobody looked at him. Nobody ever looked at him. That was the point. Calloway Tower rose 50 stories above Midtown Manhattan, all glass and steel and architectural ambition. The kind of building where people in expensive suits made decisions that affected thousands of lives without ever knowing the names of the people those decisions destroyed. Garrett entered through the service entrance in the back, swiped his employee badge, nodded to the security guard who didn't bother to nod back. His supervisor was waiting in the maintenance office. Thornton, big gala tonight. Stay in the background, fix anything that breaks, and for God's sake, don't embarrass us in front of the VIPs. Yes, sir. These people are worth more than you'll make in 100 lifetimes. They don't want to see guys like us. Understand? Guys like us. Invisible. Forgettable. The people who kept the lights on while the important people did important things. Understood. In the main lobby, a young executive walking while staring at his phone collided directly with Garrett, spilling coffee across his maintenance uniform. Watch it, janitor. No apology, just a dismissive glance and a continued march toward the elevators. Garrett wiped at the stain with a rag from his pocket. The coffee was hot. It would leave a mark. He didn't say anything. He'd learned long ago that some battles weren't worth fighting. The underground parking garage was 3 levels below street level. Garrett was there to check an electrical panel that had been reported as sparking. Simple job, 20 minutes tops. But as he made his way through the garage, something caught his eye. A door. The emergency exit in the far corner. The lock was wrong, scratched around the edges, recently forced. Garrett approached slowly, his body shifting into a posture he hadn't used in 6 years. Alert, ready. The muscle memory of 1,000 dangerous situations flooding back like it had never left. On the ground nearby, half hidden behind a support column, a piece of paper. A floor plan? The 48th floor? The grand ballroom where tonight's gala would be held? And in red ink, a circle around the main stage. The spot where the CEO would stand during her speech. His blood went cold. Sir, I found something in the parking garage. Someone's been scouting the building. The head of security looked up with an expression of pure annoyance. A janitor playing detective? Let me guess, you watch a lot of cop shows? This is serious. The gala tonight, the CEO's speech. Thornton, right? Maintenance. 0 security training. The man waved dismissively. Get back to your mops. But Garrett couldn't let it go. He took the elevator to the executive floor. Found the office of Preston Hargrove, Chief Operating Officer. Preston Hargrove looked up from his desk. 53 years old, silver hair, a suit that cost more than Garrett's monthly rent. He took in Garrett's maintenance uniform with obvious distaste. "Who the hell are you?" "Mr. Hargrove, I found evidence of a potential security threat." "Hold on." Preston raised a hand. "A maintenance worker telling me about security." Preston stood up, walked to his office door, opened it wide so everyone in the outer office could see. "Everyone, our janitor here thinks he's Jason Bourne." Laughter rippled through the space. Secretaries, junior executives, all of them staring at Garrett with amused contempt. Preston's voice carried clearly. "Listen, toilet man, you want to know what you're good at? Unclogging drains, mopping floors. That's it. That's your contribution to society." He grabbed the floor plan from Garrett's hand, crumpled it into a ball, and threw it in the trash. "Leave the thinking to people who actually matter. Now get out before I have you fired." Garrett stood motionless. Around him the laughter continued, the dismissal of everything he was, reduced to a joke in a cheap uniform. He thought about the missions he'd run, the lives he'd saved, the medals locked in a box in his closet. None of it mattered here. Here, he was nobody. "Yes, sir." He turned and walked out, keeping his face neutral. But his eyes, if anyone had bothered to look, were not the eyes of a janitor. They were the eyes of Ghost Wolf. She'd heard everything. Haley had snuck into the building through the service entrance. She'd wanted to surprise her father, had worn her nicest dress, the blue one with the flowers, had even brought the drawings she'd been working on all week, her superhero daddy, with wings. But instead of surprising him, she'd ended up behind a support column, watching strangers mock her father, watching them laugh at him, watching the man in the expensive suit call him Toilet Man. Haley didn't understand much about the adult world, but she understood cruelty. Even a 9-year-old could recognize cruelty when she saw it. Her father found her 10 minutes later, near the service elevator. "Haley, what are you doing here?" "I wanted to surprise you." Her voice wobbled. "I heard what they said, Daddy. Why were they so mean to you?" Garrett knelt down to her eye level. "Some people only see what's on the outside, honey. They see the uniform. They don't look any deeper than that." "But that's not fair." "No, sweetheart, it's not fair. You're not what they said. You're my superhero." Garrett pulled her into a hug. "And you're my everything. No matter what anyone says about me, I have you. That makes me the luckiest man in the world." He walked her back to the service entrance. "Sweetheart, you need to go back to Grandma's house. I have to work tonight." "But Daddy, no buts." He knelt down, cupping her face in his hands. "I need you to be safe. Can you do that for me?" Haley nodded reluctantly. "Okay, but you'll come home tonight, right?" "I promise." He put her in a cab, paid the driver, and watched until the yellow car disappeared around the corner. What he didn't know was that Haley had already made up her mind. She would go to Grandma's house. She would eat dinner and pretend everything was fine. And then, when Grandma fell asleep in front of the TV like she always did, Haley would sneak out again, because her daddy needed her, even if he didn't know it yet. In a cramped apartment in Queens, a man named Nathan Vance was preparing for war. The walls of his living room were covered with newspaper clippings, photographs, company documents, 3 years of evidence, 3 years of rage, all leading to tonight. He picked up the photograph in the center of the wall, a family portrait, himself, his wife Maria, their daughter Mia. Taken at Mia's 5th birthday party, all of them laughing, none of them knowing what was coming. Maria was dead now. Workplace accident at a Callaway Industries manufacturing plant. Faulty equipment that the company had known about for months but refused to replace. Callaway Industries had denied responsibility, blamed Maria for operator error. Their lawyers made sure Nathan couldn't sue. After Maria died, Nathan had spiraled. Depression, drinking, lost his job, lost his apartment, lost Mia. His 7-year-old daughter had been placed in foster care because the court deemed him unfit. Nathan picked up the gun from his kitchen table. Tonight, someone would notice him. But there was one more photograph on the wall, one that didn't fit with the others. Nathan Vance in a security guard uniform, carrying a small child out of a burning car. 3 years ago, he'd been a shift supervisor in Callaway Tower's security department. A car in the executive garage had caught fire. The CEO's daughter was trapped inside. Nathan had run into the flames without thinking, had burned his hands, his arms, his chest, pulling that little girl to safety. Rosie Callaway. He'd saved her life. 6 months later, when his injuries made it impossible to continue as a security guard, Callaway Industries had demoted him to maintenance. Reduced salary, reduced benefits. When Maria died and he'd tried to fight for justice, they'd fired him entirely. They'd never even learned his name. Nathan tucked the gun into his waistband and headed for the door. The transformation of Callaway Tower's grand ballroom was something out of a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers scattered light like diamonds. Gold accents gleamed against white marble. Flowers filled every surface. Garrett stood near the back wall, watching the beautiful people arrive. Women in gowns that cost more than his car. Men in suits that cost more than his rent. All of them laughing, networking, being seen. None of them looked at him. None of them ever did. But Garrett looked at them, watched how they moved, how the security guards positioned themselves. Old habits, the assessment patterns of a soldier who'd spent years identifying threats. Something felt wrong tonight. He couldn't explain it, but his instincts were screaming. Rosie Callaway stood alone in a corner of the ballroom, trying to make herself invisible. Her mother was across the room, surrounded by men in suits. The other children had formed their own cluster near the dessert table. None of them had invited Rosie to join. "That's the Callaway girl," she'd heard one of them whisper. "My dad says her mom is like super cold." Rosie had pretended not to hear, had developed that skill over the past 3 years. "Mind if I sit here?" She looked up. A man in a maintenance uniform was lowering himself onto the empty chair beside her. He had kind eyes and something in his face that made her feel safe. "You're the janitor," she said. "That's right. And you're the girl who looks like she'd rather be anywhere else in the world." Despite herself, Rosie almost smiled. "How did you know?" "Because I feel exactly the same way." He didn't try to make small talk, just sat there, quiet and comfortable, like he understood that sometimes the best company was someone who didn't expect anything from you. "Those kids over there," Rosie finally said, "they don't like me because of my mom. Do you like who you are?" Nobody had ever asked her that before. "I think so." "Then that's all that matters." The janitor smiled at her, a real smile. "You know what I tell my daughter? The bravest people are the ones who stay kind, even when the world isn't kind to them." Something loosened in Rosie's chest, something that had been tight for so long she'd forgotten it was there. "You have a daughter?" "Haley, she's 9, and she's the bravest person I know." "I wish I was brave." "Kid, you're braver than you think. Being alone in a room full of people who don't see you, that takes more courage than most adults ever have to show." For the first time all night, Rosie genuinely smiled. "Daddy!" Garrett turned to find Haley racing toward him across the ballroom floor, her blue dress flying behind her. "Haley, what are you doing here?" "I snuck out again." She wasn't even slightly apologetic. "Grandma fell asleep during her show. I had to make sure you were okay, Daddy." "Sweetheart, you can't just—" But Haley had already noticed Rosie. "Hi, I'm Haley. Your dress is really pretty. Want to see the drawing I made for my dad?" Rosie blinked, unused to such direct friendliness. "Okay?" Haley plopped down on the floor between them and produced a folded piece of paper from her pocket. The drawing showed a man with enormous wings spread wide, wearing what was clearly supposed to be a maintenance uniform. Above him, "My superhero daddy." "Your dad has wings?" Rosie asked. Not real wings, but he protects me from everything bad. That's what superheroes do. Rosie stared at the drawing. Then she looked up at Garrett like she was seeing something she'd missed before. I wish my mom was a superhero, she said quietly. Haley reached out and took Rosie's hand. Maybe she is, but she just forgot. Sometimes grown-ups forget they have powers. Adrienne was about to take the stage when she noticed her daughter. Rosie was sitting on the floor near the back wall with two other people. A girl about her own age, and a man in a maintenance uniform. And Rosie was laughing. Adrienne couldn't remember the last time she'd heard her daughter laugh. Ms. Calloway, her assistant touched her arm. They're ready for you. Right. Yes. The spotlight was blinding. Adrienne stepped to the podium, Rosie now standing beside her, and began her speech about corporate responsibility and community investment. She was 3 minutes in when she saw him, a man pushing through the crowd, moving wrong, his body language all sharp angles and suppressed violence. Their eyes met. He pulled out a gun. Calloway! The scream cut through the ballroom like a blade. The music stopped. Every head turned toward the man standing in the middle of the dance floor, the gun catching the light of 1,000 chandeliers. 3 years ago, I saved your daughter's life. Nathan Vance's voice cracked, tears streaming down his face even as his hand kept the gun steady. I ran into a burning car for her. I burned my hands, my arms, my chest, and you people never even learned my name. The crowd scattered, screaming, stumbling over each other. Security guards reached for their weapons, but they were too far away. Your company killed my wife, took my daughter, destroyed everything I had. Nathan's aim shifted from Adrienne to the small figure standing beside her. Rosie, now you'll know what it feels like to lose the person you love most. Garrett saw it all in slow motion. The gunman, the trembling weapon, the little girl in the white dress, frozen with terror. He saw Adrienne reaching for her daughter, but she was on the wrong side, unable to shield Rosie from the bullet. He saw Haley across the room, her face white with fear. He saw Nathan Vance's finger tightening on the trigger. And in that moment, Garrett Thornton, maintenance worker, nobody, invisible man, was gone. Ghost Wolf took his place. His body moved without conscious thought. 12 years of special forces training, 6 years of rust. None of it mattered. The muscle memory was absolute. He ran. Not the awkward scramble of a civilian, but the precise, explosive movement of a soldier. Vaulting over a table, weaving through the panicked crowd. Nathan saw him coming. Their eyes met. Two men, both fathers, both invisible, both pushed to the breaking point by a world that had forgotten they existed. Something passed between them. Recognition, understanding. But Nathan's finger was already moving. Garrett launched himself onto the stage, threw his body in front of Rosie, spread his arms wide. The gunshot echoed through the ballroom like the end of the world. The bullet hit Garrett in the chest. He felt it, the impact, the searing heat, the strange cold that followed. Felt his legs buckle. But even then he was reaching for Rosie, pulling her down, covering her with himself. Security had tackled Nathan. The gun clattered across the floor. But Rosie was underneath him. Rosie was safe. You're safe now, Garrett whispered. You're safe. His eyes found Haley across the room. His daughter stood frozen, her face a mask of horror. He tried to smile, tried to tell her everything would be fine. I love you, sweetheart. The words came out as barely a breath. Then the darkness took him. The dog tag slipped from his collar as he fell, skittered across the stage floor, landed at the feet of an older man in a military dress uniform. General Richard Whitmore picked it up, read the inscription. His face went pale. My God, he breathed. Ghost Wolf. It's really him. The hospital waiting room was the color of despair. Haley sat in a plastic chair, her blue dress stained with her father's blood. Clutching the drawing she'd made him, the wings were smeared red now. She hadn't cried since the ambulance, had gone somewhere inside herself where the tears couldn't reach. He'd promised. He'd promised he'd come home. Rosie sat beside her, their shoulders touching. The girl who'd been a stranger 2 hours ago now felt like the only solid thing in a world that had tipped sideways. "Is your daddy going to be okay?" Rosie whispered. "He has to be." Haley's voice was flat. "He promised." In the surgical suite, 3 doctors fought to save his life. Bullet missed the heart by less than an inch, nicked the pulmonary artery. He's lost almost 3 liters of blood. BP's crashing, 60/40. The surgeon looked at the body on her table, at the old wounds that told a story of violence and survival. Whoever this man is, he's been through hell before. His body knows how to survive. Let's give it the chance to do it one more time. The video went viral in less than an hour. Someone in the ballroom had kept their phone recording through the entire incident. The footage spread across social media like wildfire. But it wasn't just the shooting that captured the internet's attention. Someone had also recorded Preston Hargrove that morning. The COO's mocking laughter, his sneering toilet man insult. The 2 videos played side by side on every news channel in America. Video 1. Our janitor thinks he's Jason Bourne. Video 2. The janitor diving in front of a bullet to save a child's life. The commentary wrote itself. The man they called Toilet Man. The man they treated like nothing. He's the one who saved that little girl. We walk past heroes every single day and never know it. Preston Hargrove's name became a curse word overnight. General Whitmore found Adrian in the hospital chapel. She wasn't praying, just sitting in the front pew, staring at a simple wooden cross, her designer gown wrinkled, her perfect composure completely shattered. "That man who saved your daughter," Whitmore said, "do you know who he really is?" Adrian shook her head. "Sergeant Garrett Thornton, call sign Ghost Wolf, one of the most decorated Special Forces operatives in American history." Whitmore told her about the missions, the rescues, the impossible operations that had saved hundreds of lives in places that didn't officially exist. He walked away from all of it 6 years ago. His wife was dying, cancer. He had a choice. One more deployment or spending her final months by her side. He chose her. He chose her. And after she passed, he chose their daughter. Disappeared completely. Ghost Wolf became a ghost for real. Adrian thought about the man in the maintenance uniform, the man she'd walked past 100 times without ever seeing. And we treated him like he was nothing. The thing about real heroes, they don't care about being seen. They just do what needs to be done. Whitmore stood up. "The question is, Ms. Calloway, now that you've seen who he is, what are you going to do about it?" Preston Hargrove was terminated in a board meeting that lasted exactly 7 minutes. Adrian didn't give a speech. She simply walked into the conference room and said 3 words. "You're fired. Leave." Preston tried to argue. The security guards escorted him from the building before he finished his first sentence. She went to see Nathan Vance next. The man who had shot Garrett sat in a holding cell, his eyes vacant, his body slumped like a puppet with cut strings. He didn't look like a monster. He looked like what he was, a broken man who had lost everything. "You saved my daughter once," Adrian said through the bars. 3 years ago, the car fire. I never knew your name." Nathan looked up slowly. "Would it have mattered?" "I don't know. Maybe not then." She gripped the bars. "But it matters now. What happened to your wife? What my company did? I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't bring Maria back. Doesn't give me my daughter." "No, it doesn't." Adrian took a breath. "But I can make sure no one else goes through what you went through. And the man you shot, Garrett Thornton, before he went into surgery, he said something." She paused, her voice cracking. "He said, 'You're not a monster. You're a father who lost everything. He said the difference between a hero and a villain is sometimes just whether someone was there to catch them when they fell. Tears slipped down Nathan's face. I almost killed him. But you didn't. And he seems to think you deserve a second chance. She reached through the bars. I'm not pressing charges, Nathan. I'm going to get you help. And I'm going to find a way to get your daughter back. Why? Because I should have done it 3 years ago. Because I should have known your name. Garrett woke up to the sound of crying. For a moment he thought he was dreaming. Thought he was back in the hospital with Rachel. But then a small body threw itself onto his chest and a familiar voice screamed, "Daddy!" loud enough to wake every patient in the ICU. Haley, his arms came up automatically, wrapping around his daughter despite the pain. She was shaking, crying, alive. "Daddy, you kept your promise." She was laughing and sobbing at the same time. "You came back." "I'll always come back, sweetheart. Always." There were other people in the room, doctors, nurses, Adrian and Rosie hovering near the door. But for this moment, there was only Haley. Only the reason he'd thrown himself in front of a bullet without a second thought. Later, when Haley had finally cried herself out and fallen asleep in the chair beside his bed, Adrian sat down to talk. She told him about Nathan, about the decision not to press charges, about the changes she was implementing at her company. She told him about Preston Hargrove, about the firing, about the public reckoning. Garrett listened without interrupting. When she finished, he simply nodded. "I'm not that man anymore. You saved my daughter's life. Any father would have done the same." "No." Adrian's voice was firm. The other men in that room, with their expensive suits and important titles, they ran. They hid. She leaned forward. "You didn't think at all. You just moved. You just protected. That's not something any father would do. That's something only a hero would do." There was silence. Then Adrian straightened up. "The board has voted to establish the Thornton Foundation. Veteran support, mental health resources, scholarships for children of workers. We want you to be the director." Garrett shook his head. "Then what do you want?" "Anything." He thought about Nathan Vance, about the broken man who had pulled a trigger out of desperation. "Get Nathan his daughter back." Adrienne blinked. "What?" "His daughter, Mia. She's in foster care. He needs help, real help, not prison. And when he's ready, he needs to be a father again." "He almost killed you?" "He's a man who lost everything and had no one to catch him when he fell." Garrett's eyes moved to Haley, sleeping peacefully. "If I hadn't had her, I might have fallen the same way." The line between hero and villain is thinner than people think. Adrian stared at him for a long moment. "You're the most extraordinary man I've ever met, Garrett Thornton. I'm just a father. That's all I ever wanted to be." Epilogue. 6 months later. The park in Brooklyn was crowded with families enjoying the spring sunshine. Garrett pushed 2 girls on the swings. Haley on the left, laughing as she soared higher. Rosie on the right, her smile so different from the timid girl she'd been 6 months ago. "Higher, Mr. Garrett." "Dad, not too high." Nearby, on a bench beneath an old oak tree, Adrienne Calloway sat with her laptop closed. She wasn't working, wasn't checking emails. She was just watching her daughter laugh. Rosie had changed so much since that night. Started talking more, smiling more, had begun to emerge from the shell she'd built. And Adrienne had changed too. Had learned to leave work at a reasonable hour, had learned to braid her daughter's hair in the mornings, even when it meant being late to meetings. Garrett walked over and sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For reminding me how to see my own daughter. For reminding me that there's more to life than quarterly reports." She paused. "For being exactly who you are." Garrett smiled. His chest still ached sometimes where the bullet had torn through. The scar would be with him forever. But so would this. These moments. This strange, unexpected family that had formed from tragedy. You know what my wife used to say? She used to say the world is full of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. You just have to look. I'm trying to learn how to look. You're getting better at it. Adrian turned to face him. In the golden afternoon light, with her hair loose and her designer clothes replaced by simple jeans, she looked nothing like the CEO who had once walked past him without a second glance. Garrett? Yeah. Rosie asked me something this morning. She asked if you and Haley could come to her birthday party next month. Adrian hesitated. And then she asked if maybe you could come to dinner sometime. Just the four of us. Garrett felt something warm spread through his chest, something that had nothing to do with the healing wound. What did you tell her? I told her I'd have to ask you. He looked at this woman who had once represented everything he'd walked away from. But she wasn't that woman anymore. Just like he wasn't Ghost Wolf anymore. They were just two single parents, trying to figure out how to raise their daughters in a world that didn't make it easy. Tell her yes, Garrett said. Tell her we'd love to. Adrian smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. She's going to be so happy. So am I. Across the city, in a treatment facility that Adrian's foundation had funded, Nathan Vance sat in a sunlit room playing chess with his daughter. Mia was 10 years old now, tall for her age, with her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn chin. The reunion had been difficult, months of therapy, supervised visits, careful rebuilding of trust. But Nathan was sober, stable, present in a way he hadn't been since Maria died. He moved his night. Mia captured it with her bishop. You're getting too good at this, he said. Maybe you're getting worse. He laughed. It felt strange. Strange but good. Dad, Mia's voice was serious. Are you going to go away again? Nathan reached across the board and took his daughter's hand. Never. Not ever again. Promise? I promise. And for the first time in 3 years, Nathan Vance knew he could keep that promise. The sun was setting over Brooklyn when Garrett and Haley walked home. Haley held his hand, skipping beside him, chattering about school and friends and the new drawing she was working on. Daddy? Yes, sweetheart? Are you still a superhero? Garrett looked down at his daughter, at the girl who had given him a reason to live when Rachel died, the reason he got up every morning. You know what, honey? I think we're all superheroes. Some of us wear capes, some wear suits, some wear uniforms. He looked down at his ordinary clothes, jeans, a faded t-shirt, nothing special. And some of us just wear what we have. Haley grinned. I like that. Invisible superheroes. Exactly. The ones nobody sees, until the moment they're needed most. They walked on, father and daughter, their shadows stretching long behind them as the sun dipped below the horizon. Garrett Thornton was still invisible, still ordinary, still the man that the world overlooked. But his daughter saw him. Rosie saw him. Adrian Calloway saw him now. And sometimes that was enough. Sometimes being seen by the people who matter is the only superpower anyone really needs. The world is full of invisible heroes. They fix your lights and clean your floors. They raise their children alone and never complain. They carry scars from battles you'll never know about, and they get up every morning and do it all again. You walk past them every single day. Maybe tomorrow, try looking a little closer. You might be surprised by what you see.